Whew. Let's go. Good morning, church. How's everybody feeling today? Okay. What do you guys have in your house? Money? Gold? Jewelry? Mercedes Benz? Don't worry, don't worry. It's not a stick up. I'm not trying to rob you guys, yeah? Don't worry. The passage for this morning that I'll be focusing on is 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 1 to 7. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but I'll summarize the passage real quick. Now, this passage is about a lady who lost her husband. Now, that wasn't the only unfortunate thing that happened to this woman. Her husband left her with a ton of debt. Now, neither of us pray for us to lose a loved one, but imagine losing a loved one who then leaves you with debt on top of that loss. That's crazy. Anyways, the creditor was coming after her two sons to repay that debt. Back in the day, if you owed a debt, if you couldn't pay, they come for your kids to recoup the debt. That was the situation back then. Now, in absolute dismay and shock, she cried out to the prophet Elisha and said, "Hey, they're about to take my two sons to repay this debt." And Elisha looked at her and said, "What can I do for you?" And then he goes on to say, "What do you have in the house?" I'm sure she was thinking, "I'm telling you I'm about to lose my two sons. You're asking what do I have in the house? How is I going to pay the debt?" Yeah. Anyway, she says, "Well, I have nothing but a jar of oil." And then he says to her, "Go to all of your neighbors, every single one of them, gather as many vessels as you can, and keep pouring that oil into the vessel." She obeyed. She kept pouring with her two sons, and then it got to the point where there was no more oil. And then she went back to him and said, "Hey, the oil is finished." Elisha then gave her another set of instructions saying, "Go sell the oil, pay off the debt, leave off the rest." Now, there's a lot to unpack from this message, but I'm going to focus on 4 quick points. Now, the first thing is the problems of this life aren't just going to disappear. She had a debt. God could have wiped out that debt, right? He could have said, "Hey, the debt is forgiven." But he used the prophet Elisha to bring a solution to that problem, right? He asked her a question, "What do you have in the house?" So the problem wasn't going away, but it was how to solve the problem that Elisha brought to her. Now we get to the next point, which is the answer to your prayer is much closer than you think. It might be in your house. It might be a skill you have. It might be a talent. The answer to your prayer is much closer than you think, like we see here. The answer to the lady's prayer here was the oil that she thought was inconsequential. Now, the third point is obedience. Elisha said, "Go borrow vessels from all your neighbors." She could have processed it and thought, "What is this guy talking about? Go borrow vessels. I'm trying to pay a debt here. What do you mean go borrow vessels?" But she obeyed, right? Now, the last thing is, now to get to that answer, to identify whether the answer to your problem is really in your house, right? You have to cry out. You have to cry out to God. I mean, back in the day, you could cry out to a prophet who then interceded on your behalf. But now, these days, we have a direct link to God. Cry out to God, right? Now, I'll end this with a personal testimony which kind of illustrates these 3 points. So I moved to Calgary about 3 years ago. I'm actually a lawyer by profession. So trying to reintegrate here was extremely difficult. It got to a point I gave up. Like, I was like, you know what? I'm not doing law anymore. Let's carry on in financial services. So I was lucky enough to pivot into another career line. I was okay by every standard. Money was good, life was good, but I was unhappy. I was sad. I felt like I was stuck. And like I said, I gave up. Then came Crazy Faith. Don't worry, this is not a paid ad, right? Crazy Faith came along, and feeling stuck and, restless. I wrote on the wall, trying to dare God, really. I didn't really believe, to be honest. I didn't really believe. I just put it on the wall. And then about a year after, it happened that I got back into law, right? Now, in that process, I did get some specific instructions to reach out to someone specific after I did the Crazy Faith thing. I was like, what is this about? Anyways, I obeyed. I did it. Anyways, long story short, 3 months ago, I got called to the Alberta bar, so I'm licensed to practice now. Now, to kind of connect everything together, for me, my crying out to God was writing on that wall. That was my act. Now, my obedience was reaching out to this person who kind of was a catalyst for all of this happening. And the thing that I had in my house was the fact that law was what I was, that was, law was the thing that was going to get me out of feeling the way I was feeling. Because like I said, I'd given up on practicing law. I was going to move into other career, lines. I was already thinking about courses and things like that. But I had something in my house, which was the practice of law. God made that happen. Guys, again, I ask you, what do you have in your house? Think about that for a second. And don't forget, you have to cry out. To get to the answers to what you have in your house, you first of all have to cry out to God and let him do the rest. And again, obey, obey, obey. Pastor Dan, Pastor Amber, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it. Thank you.